regarding the keynote speech by Mr. Amitabhkant, and I'll introduce him in a minute. Before that, since I missed the dinner yesterday, let me take a couple of minutes to talk about not just mine, but my family's association with Professor Panagaria. My name is Poonam Gupta. I have been working at the World Bank last 4 years. Prior work experience includes IMF, Delhi School of Economics, and IPFP. Deepak and I, we are both married. We got to know Professor Panagaria in the mid-1990s when we were young graduate students at the University of Maryland. And it was really heartwarming to have a friendly Indian face among the faculty members. Eventually, both Deepak and I wrote papers with Professor Panagaria, and I wrote my PhD thesis under him. And till date, he remains a trusted advisor, a mentor, and a scholar we both admire and respect. I'm sure people told quite a few funny stories yesterday. For us, we don't have as many funny stories. What we have is a warm and fuzzy feeling when we think about Professor Panagaria. So much generosity and respect he showed towards us. I'll just mention 2 or 3 characteristics, which again perhaps are being repeated today. One is his integrity, personal, professional, social. I have yet to come across any other person who has such high level of integrity as Professor Panagaria. Generous and respectful to his young co-authors and to his students. When it comes to sharing co-authorship, and there is actually a particular incident we had. We together wrote an op-ed for Times of India. And the way it would have, the Times of India would have it in those days, they would only acknowledge one co-author as the lead author. And without consulting any of us, they put his name above the article and mine underneath. And he panicked, and he called me right away from Washington, D.C. saying that this is going to happen, and I'm going to stop it. And that made me realize, how fair he is to his co-authors. Another characteristic is down-to-earth attitude. The glamour of policy making or professional success does not touch him. Again, very few people you come across who is as down-to-earth as Professor Panagaria, true to his core values. And finally, he's the one who ignited our interest in India, just like that of many others here. So Deepak and I, we both, again, yearn to go back and work in India, but we have managed to be off and on. So the teaching job that I took up at Delhi School of Economics was due to the inspiration that we got from Professor Panagaria. Again, no funny stories, just one little incident as a young graduate student. When we would be sitting in his office, one at a time, of course, we were neighbors there. Of course, neighbors also in Bethesda, Maryland. So Deepak and I would be sharing an office which was very close to Professor Panagaria, and we would be talking to him in the afternoons. Again, as I said, one at a time, not as a family. And there would be a call that he would receive at 3:34, and we would dread that call. That call would be from Professor Jagdish Bhagwati. That meant he'll just pick up the phone and he say, "Hi Jagdish," and then he'll continue talking for a good amount of time, 40-45 minutes. And we would not know whether we leave the room or we just keep waiting there. So that's one memory we have of dreading that call, "Hi Jagdish," and we sitting there, wondering what we do about that. So now let me move on to our speaker, a highly acclaimed policy maker in India, and it is with a matter of great pleasure and delight that I'm introducing the speaker for today's keynote address, Mr. Amitabhkant. Mr. Kant is a household name in India and also very well known abroad. And I think this audience does not really need an introduction on him, but nevertheless, let me start. He is currently CEO, Niti Ayog, and in this capacity, he's truly engaged in helping transform the country. He is a member of the Indian Administrative Service and has had a distinguished career as one of the top administrative officers of the country, an alumnus of the prestigious St. Stephen's College, JNU, and Harvard University. He has held many responsible positions in the government. These include the Secretary, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Chairman of the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor Development Corporation, and National Productivity Council. He has been recognized for his leadership and contributions through a number of prestigious awards and honors. Many of us also know him through the highly impactful campaigns that he designed and led to promote India and tourism, including the Incredible India campaign in God's own country for tourism in Kerala and Make in India. He has written a highly acclaimed book, Branding India, an Incredible Story. On a highly contemporary parameter of influence, he has a nearly 250,000 followers on his Twitter account. So friends, may I invite an incredibly talented Mr. Khan for today's lunchtime keynote speech.
Thank you, Poonam, for those very kind words. All that she was saying was that here's a person who's worked in the North Bloc and the South Bloc, which are the two governing bodies of Government of India. We govern Government of India from the North Bloc and South Bloc. And she was saying that he's managed to block the growth of India from both the North and South Bloc. So, great pleasure. You know, one of the, back home in India, they say the most difficult thing to do is to give a post-lunch lecture. You know, either you're snoring or you're snoozing, or guys like Vivek are busy handling their mobile. You know, so I heard this lovely after lunch talk by this great Italian archaeologist in Delhi about a fortnight back. It was absolutely riveting talk. You know, one of the most brilliant talks that I've ever heard, and he took you to another level of cultural rejuvenation. And you know, he started off his lecture by saying that actually there are only three kinds of people who constantly need a mobile phone. It's either a plumber, or a medical doctor, or an adulterous person like Vivek, who's busy doing his extramarital affair. You know, and since in the audience, and he said, in the audience, since I know that there are no plumbers and there are no medical doctors, anybody who's touching the phone has to be the third category. And throughout that 1 hour, not a single person looked at it. So, you know, it's a great pleasure to be here because, you know, I've had this great honor and privilege to work with Dr. Panagaria. It's been a great learning experience for me working with him because he really taught me the art of evidence-based policy planning. He taught me the art of looking at data. And I think more than anything else, he was a great reformist at heart. I mean, he's a great reformist at heart. He cuts through all the haze and maze of data and hits at the end picture. I mean, rarely do you come across an economist. Most economists quite often quite muddle-headed. But he's one person with such immense clarity of mind to achieve the end objective. And therefore, it was a real pleasure to drive the process of whether it was the new energy policy for India, whether it was trying to take India away from getting into, you know, in India, the government is embroiled in a lot of running of public sector, and he drove this whole process of taking government away from it so that we could privatize and do strategic disinvestment, or we could really look at a number of our institutions which could be restructured for this century. So I think I've personally gained enormously by my very close association with Dr. Panagaria, and I think that the country has greatly benefited by his presence in India. And I think his coming back to Colombia is a huge, huge loss to India and a great vacuum he's left behind. So it's, we're really missing him, but so is life. Wonderful to be here. So Praveen wanted me to talk a little bit about India and give you a broad perspective of what's happening. So India, you know, it continues, you know, it's growing at about 7% plus, despite the last quarter bit, but it's bouncing back again. It's growing at 7% plus. It remains an oasis of growth in the midst of a very barren economic landscape across the world. But the challenge for India really is to grow at higher rates, and high rates for a 3-decade period, growing at about 9 to 10% year after year, 3 decades or more, to be able to lift a very, very young population above the poverty line. 72% of our population is below the age of 32, and to my mind, this is the biggest social and economic transition that is taking place across the world. That the population across America, across Europe is getting older and older, and is getting younger and younger in India, and will keep getting younger till about 2042. So these are astonishing times for India, and rarely has a country not created wealth when it has such light dependency burden. And therefore, what does India need to do to grow at those high rates, 9 to 10%, 3 decades or more, year after year, and capture this compounding power of growth to lift people above poverty line? I think first and foremost, to my mind, India has made itself, over the years, last 70 years, a very complex, very complicated, and a very difficult place to do business in. So India must scrap a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork, acts, simply make itself very easy and simple for people to create wealth. And I think what this government has done in the last 3 years under Prime Minister Modi is to drive this process of making India easy and simple. So in the last 3 years, it's actually scrapped 1,200 laws, over 1,200 laws. It's never been done before in any country of the world. You can register a company in 1 day. You can register a medium and small enterprise in 15 minutes time today on the net. And the whole focus is on digitizing everything so that you can cut away human interface away. This whole process of bringing in a new bankruptcy law, having one tax, the goods and services tax across the country, are all, the entire focus has been to make India easy and simple. But India is a very large country. It is important to understand that it's bigger than 24 countries of Europe, plus another 30,000 kilometers. And therefore, much of the action is in states. One of the things the government has tried to do is to bring in a huge amount of competition among states and make states compete with each other. So the first year we did the competition among states for ease of doing business. Gujarat came #1, and Gujarat has this spectacular record of growing at rapid pace for over 12, 13 years, at higher rates than China, actually, if you look at it. So Gujarat came #1. But the very next year, actually, the new states of Telangana and Andhra knocked out Gujarat. They came #1 and 2. Gujarat was #3. But the good thing was that the states in the eastern part of India, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, came 4th and 5th. And these are the mineral-rich states of India. So if the mineral-rich states of India perform well, India will grow and prosper. And therefore, ranking states, naming and shaming states, to my mind, is a very important thing. And once you put it in public domain, then good governance will become good politics. And I think this is what the government is doing, not only on ease of doing business, but across several areas. And we'll talk about that. We are doing it in education, we are doing it in health, we are doing it in management of water, and our challenge is that make states compete, rank them, name and shame them. So first and foremost, make India easy and simple, create an environment where people can create wealth. The #2 is that my belief is that it's impossible for India to grow at rapid pace for a very long period till India doesn't become a very integral part of the global supply chain. And therefore, in the last 3 years, India has opened up its economy. India has opened up its economy across sectors after sector, from defense to insurance to e-commerce. Every single sector of its economy has been opened up. And actually, India's foreign direct investment has grown by about 61% in the last 3 years. It's the #1 recipient of FDI across the world beating China. It's grown by 61% at a point of time when FDI across the world has fallen by 16%. So it's demonstrated its ability to open up its economy, it's demonstrated its ability to attract foreign investment, and it's demonstrated its political determination that it has the political will to open up vast sectors of its economy. And I think it needs to do this with foreign trade as well. And as it opens up more and more, you'll have a lot of technology playing out in India to ensure that manufacturing becomes to large size and scale, and we'll talk on some of these issues. The third aspect of India is that we are seeing a huge amount of energy, vibrancy, and dynamism in India amongst its young entrepreneurs. India has a very vibrant startup movement. It is some of the most amazing startups, and actually, I personally feel that the connect between Silicon Valley and Bangalore and Hyderabad is more than the connect between Silicon Valley and New York. And you're seeing some unique innovations taking place in India, not merely in e-commerce, where Flipkart is taking on Amazon of the world, but also in a vast range of other areas. There's a young girl called Pranshu Bhandari, who started with a startup called Culture Alley, teaching people Mandarin and Japanese, ended up starting an app called Hello English, and has last year taught 9 million Indians how to speak English. 9 million. No school, no college has been able to do this. Young girl. We have a startup called Mitra Biotech, which has relocated personalized cancer care, relocated from Silicon Valley into Bangalore. And it's an amazing startup for people who are interested in seeing what personalized cancer care can do without falling back on a lot of medical doctors. Or Conscio Medical. I was not aware that there are 100 million people across the world who suffer from issues of stool management. And there are 16 million people in India who suffer from issues of stool management. It's not, people don't talk about it, but it's a very major problem. And Conscio Medical did an adapter, which was then accepted by All India Institute of Medical Sciences, by Fortis, by Escorts Hospitals in India, is today exported across the world and has been a path-breaking innovation. Or look at a startup called Baiju, where Mark Zuckerberg has invested and is making path-breaking work in the spread of quality education in India. Or when the tsunami happened in Chennai, the government of Tamil Nadu was not able to spot out people who had been stranded or reach out food packets to them, but it was one of our startups called Social Cops. Using that, the government of Tamil Nadu could reach out to people and provide food packets to them. Or women entrepreneurs, Meena Ganesh, Shanti Mohan, all these are remarkable young women who are doing amazing startup. Let's Venture or Porthia, where they've been able to put a vast number of doctors in touch with patients. So what India is seeing is a tremendous energy, vibrancy, and dynamism which is rarely seen today anywhere. I was quite amazed to hear the director of IIT Mumbai telling me that last year, 40% of the students who graduated out of IIT Madras actually did their own startup or joined a startup. So the country is moving away from creating generations of job seekers into a vast number of job creators. And this energy, which has started from Bangalore, Hyderabad, etc., has spread to vast number of new metros, including Pune, Gurgaon, many, many areas. And therefore, I visualize that this movement of startups will continue to grow in a very big way. The fourth aspect, which is important to talk about, is that in India, we are seeing a huge spread of impact of innovation. And actually, in the last 4 to 5 years, over 750 multinational corporations have relocated their R&D centers. And R&D centers are normally located with their head offices of multinational corporations. But starting with Cisco, IBM, Huawei, all the pharma companies of the world, all their R&D centers have been relocated to either Bangalore and Hyderabad, and they've created over about 900,000 jobs in India just doing R&D work. And a lot of innovation for the rest of the world is happening from India. I mean, just to give you some examples, for instance, the GE's ECG machine, which was manufactured in the United States of America at $35,000 US, is being manufactured in India for $3,000, enabling GE to do an ECG for $1, just $1, as compared to $35 here in the United States. Or the Philips low-cost sound recording machine, or John Dickery's 60 HP tractor, or Honeywell's turbocharger. All these are innovations done in either Hyderabad, Bangalore, Pune, for the rest of the world. And these are all innovations which have enabled India to do global penetration. So India has actually combined its innovative spirit, its entrepreneurship, its skill to do a lot of unique, frugal engineering for the rest of the world, which has enabled India to put its orbiter around the Mars at 1/10 the cost of the United States of America. It's cost India less than a Hollywood movie to put an orbiter around the Mars. And therefore, 4 years back, Renault, which is a European car-making company, and has actually never in its history of 118 years, never ever in its history of 118 years, ever made a car outside Europe, came to Chennai and innovated, designed, manufactured a car called the Renault Kwid. And this Renault Kwid is now being exported to about 40 countries across the world. And Hyundai, which came looking at the domestic market, is actually exporting almost 61% of its production to 123 countries across the world. Or look at the first car which came in, first company, Maruti, which came in, Suzuki, which came into India, which did the first car, is actually re-exporting whatever it's, the Baleno car which it manufactures in India. It doesn't sell, it sells very little of it in the domestic market, but exports it back to Japan. So what India has demonstrated is its great ability to do great manufacturing as well. Automobile, auto components, pharma, many of these areas, is done great abilities, demonstrated its great ability to do unique manufacturing and penetrate global markets. It's demonstrated its ability to do innovation for the rest of the world. The fifth point I want to talk about is that how India will manage its process of urbanization in the years to come will be critical for India. And while I talk here, every minute in India you have 30 Indians moving from rural areas to urban areas. And if you go by the latest McKinsey study, by 2050 you'll have over 500 million Indians moving from rural areas to urban areas. Now urbanization is critical. I mean, urbanization has driven growth. It's lifted vast segments of people above poverty line. It's the center, it drives creativity, it drives growth. And while cities account for just 3% of the earth land mass, they account for almost about 70 to 75% of the global GDP, but they also account for about 70% of the CO2 emission. And the challenge for India is that when the western part of the world urbanized, when America urbanized, land, gas, and water were cheaply available. And because they were cheaply available, America had the luxury of living in New Jersey, traveling to New York, developing large limousines, guzzle gas. It had the luxury of creating cities like Atlanta, where 99.2% of the people travel by cars. So America had the luxury to do urbanization for cars and not for people. The challenge for India will be that land, gas, and water will all be scarce commodities. And if India was to follow the model of the Western world of urbanization, the world would require 4 planet Earth, but you have only 1 planet Earth. And therefore, the process of urbanization in India, which has just begun, requires a very innovative and sustainable approach. And how India manages this innovation, how it does its recycling of water, how it does its recycling of waste, how it builds public transportation will be one of the biggest challenges before India. And India has been a very reluctant urbanizer. India has been a very reluctant urbanizer, largely because of its Gandhian worldview that people will live in the villages, and that was exactly the belief of the Chinese, the peasantry revolution and so on. But China broke away from it in 1975. India persisted with it. This is the first government which is talking about urbanization in a sustainable manner, which is pushing 100 smart cities, using technology to leapfrog, and therefore 50 metros being done in India today. And therefore, the key challenge will be that if India is able to use urbanization to drive its growth, it'll be one of the biggest challenges which India has, and how it does it in an innovative and sustainable manner will be critical. The sixth point to my mind is how India can use technology to leapfrog will be critical. India is the only country in the world which has 1 billion biometric. And India is the only country in the world which has 1 billion mobile. India is also the only country in the world today which has 1 billion bank accounts. And therefore, what we are seeing today in India is that all of us are increasingly doing our bank transactions, our peer-to-peer transaction, our peer-to-merchant transactions, all happening through the mobile. And therefore, my view is that in the years to come, using the biometric and what we call the JAM Trinity, the Jan Aadhaar, which is your biometric, your mobile, and your account, India will leapfrog in many ways. When you use a credit card, it costs you 3.5% of your transaction. When you use a debit card, it costs you about 1.25 to 1.5% of the cost of transaction. But when you use your own mobile and your own biometrics, there's zero cost. Therefore, my personal view has been that in the next 3 to 4 years, India will be the first country in the world which will probably make debit card, credit card, ATMs, all technologically irrelevant. And what India is doing today is to bring in a huge amount of productive efficiency using this technology of transferring all its services. Today, whether it's scholarship, whether it's self-help groups, whatever it provides support to for its people, an Indian system was riddled with leakages. It is providing through this JAM Trinity directly into the bank account of people, and therefore the leakages have come down to virtually zero in the Indian system. And therefore, India is increasingly becoming a very, very efficient economy. 74,000 crores going into almost 35 crore bank accounts without leakages, and therefore all this money which used to be transferred through government hierarchies, bureaucracies, clerks, a whole lot of revenue officials, that's all been wiped out, all going directly straight into the bank account and is reaching the ultimate beneficiary without any leakage. And to my mind, this has been one of the most radical transformations that has taken place in technology across the world anywhere. I've not seen example of this anywhere happening where such a huge amount of bureaucracy has been cut out using technology, just reaching straight into the beneficiary account. So how India manages this process of utilization of technology to leapfrog, as it has done in the case of biometric and bank account and use of mobile technology. And it's quite amazing that quite often people ask me whether people will be able to accept it, and I went into tribal villages of Jharkhand and I found that the tribal women, and this was exactly the story when the mobile first came in, that the women in rural areas accepted mobile services much faster, much quicker than people in urban areas. And therefore, when demonetization took place and I went in to see the digital payment in tribal areas of Jharkhand, I found it the acceptance much quicker, much faster by people living below poverty line than in urban areas of Delhi and Mumbai. And therefore, my personal belief is that the acceptance of new technology would be much quicker, faster by people living in rural areas. Or if you go to Godavari and Krishna district of Andhra Pradesh, what you find is that people go to buy their ration, their food supply, their rice, wheat. The ration card dealer provides them, does the cash in and cash out for them using the mobile telephony, and therefore he's the banking correspondent as well as the ration card dealer. And therefore, mobile telephony will enable India to leapfrog. We have 450 million smartphones. But the cost of a smartphone today has come down to cost of a smartphone today has come down to as low as $6 in India today. What a new company, Reliance Jio, has demonstrated, that he provides you a smartphone and you pay him back 1,500 rupees 3 years later, and therefore in the next 2 to 3 years, I envisage that everybody in India will have a smartphone. The cost of acquisition, the cost of acquisition of a customer, Reliance Jio has acquired 180 million consumers in 4 months' time. The cost of acquisition has been $1 per consumer, as compared to $25 to $30 the cost of acquisition in the Western world. So the cost of acquisition of a consumer has radically fallen. There's been technology disruption. New player has come in and brought in a huge disruption. It's enabled people to get a smartphone, and smartphone is by very many ways has become the means to perform your daily life, your business, your transaction, your peer-to-peer group, everything. And therefore, India is in the midst of one of the biggest disruption that is taking place anywhere in the world and leading to better efficiency. Now, there are challenges for it. There are huge challenges. And I think, to my mind, the first and foremost challenge for India is that it's not possible for India to grow at rapid rates of 9 to 10% for a very long period till it consciously does not pursue a policy of gender parity. And my view is that women account for just about 20% of India's GDP, and it's very important that we take it to close to about 40 to 45%. And a conscious policy of gender parity needs to be pursued in India. And we find that every single area that we are opening up for women, they're outperforming men incidentally in every walk of life, wherever we've opened up. So it's very important that we open up vast areas of growth, and I've seen this, that every single competitive exam actually where we've provided opportunities for women, they've done much better than men. My own college, St. Stephen's College, which used to be a male bastion, and there were no girls there. When my daughter went to that same college a couple of years back, almost 88% of the students were girls, and they'd all gotten on merit. And the principal of the college then made this statement that actually if the St. Stephen's College has to remain a co-ed college, we should give 10% extra marks to boys. So it became a big controversy, and the boys said, no, we don't want 10% extra marks. And but then I went to Christ Church College in Bangalore, and the Christ Church College was just full of girls everywhere, no boys around. So I asked the vice chancellor of the college that there's girls everywhere, I see very few boys here. So he said that, well, actually we give 15% extra marks to boys, but even then they can't compete with girls. So everywhere the girls are doing better, but I think it's important to push that limit in a bigger way. Secondly, my belief is that it's it'll be very difficult for India to grow at high rates till it doesn't do production to size and scale, and it is not able to penetrate global economies. It's not possible for India to grow without exports. And India must become a large-scale player. And my belief is that unless we don't produce, India has too many medium, small, and micro enterprises. It has just too many medium, micro, and small enterprises, and these are not evolving and growing into larger enterprises. And if we do not create the right ecosystem for them to grow bigger and bigger and bigger and capture and penetrate global markets, no country in the world has been able to grow for long periods of time without penetrating global markets. Whether it was Japan, whether it was Korea, whether it was China, and therefore India must do things to size and scale, penetrate global markets, and that's critical for it. And therefore, a very conscious policy of export-led growth needs to be pursued by India, to my mind. And it has to be a very conscious policy of a determined policy to do production to that size and scale. The third point I want to make is that it's very difficult for India to grow at high rates of 9 to 10% for a long period of time till it doesn't restructure several of its institutions. Many of its institutions are outdated. To my mind, the biggest growth in India will come from opening up its health and education sector. I mean, these are sectors which have been controlled and cabined by outdated rules and regulations, and they need to be opened up in a very big way. And much of that effort is on right now, and I think Dr. Panagaria and all of us in Niti Ayog have worked towards this, but in due course, you will see the biggest job creation actually happening from education and health. And therefore, you need to completely restructure some of your institutions. You can't do this with the corrupt Medical Council of India. You need a new council to drive the health education in India. You need thousands and thousands of new doctors to penetrate India. You need many more teachers. You need to enhance the quality of your education. And all these requires a huge, completely remodeled education and health system for India. And the last point I want to make is that it's very difficult for India to grow at high rates till India does not set right 7 of its states and 200 of its districts. India has interstate disparity of growth, and India has huge disparity of growth in its districts. While the western part of India does extremely well, the southern part of India does extremely well, the eastern part of India does extremely badly, and there are huge governance issues. It is not possible for India to grow at high rates over a long period of time till it doesn't get nutrition, health, and education right in these districts and in these states. These 7 states hold the key to India's growth. Whatever you may do in the rest of India, to my mind, doesn't matter till you don't get these states and these districts right. It's not possible for India to grow with 33% of its children being stunted. It's not possible with high levels of infant mortality and maternal mortality. It's not possible for India to grow if 40% of your children in class 5 are not able to read their mother tongue of class 2. It's just not possible. And therefore, there's a huge emphasis which needs to be put on education, health, and nutrition, and put it in the right places. And to my mind, I just wanted to take you that while we continue to have pockets of underdevelopment, there are huge challenges. And as I said, there are interstate variations. And if you look at the per capita income across states, I mean, just look at where Gujarat is, or look at where Kerala is, and look at where Haryana is, and look at where Odisha, look at where Madhya Pradesh, look at where Uttar Pradesh, Bihar are. So if you don't transform Bihar, if you don't transform Jharkhand, if you don't transform Madhya Pradesh or Odisha or Uttar Pradesh, it's not possible for India to grow at very high rates for a long period of time. I mean, it can't be a scenario where 1 in every 2 women is anemic or 1 in 3 child is stunted. So my view is that this red portion of India, the red portion of India has to be made yellow and then transformed into green. And if these states in red, the red color must become yellow and subsequently into green, like this. If you are not able to transform this red portion, it will be very difficult for India. Look at underweight children. And you find Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, this entire portion is red in underweight children. I mean, you are creating how can you ever have a demographic advantage with this? So you need to transform this. The entire focus must shift here. And to my mind, these are the 201 districts of India which must be transformed. And if you take a breakup of this, 53 districts in Uttar Pradesh, 36 districts in Bihar, 27 districts in Madhya Pradesh, 17 districts in Jharkhand. So you need to transform these states, and there's a whole intergeneration cycle of undernutrition. I mean, we have to low weight, height, adolescent, small adult women, low birth weight. All this intergenerational cycles need to be broken, and without this, it's not possible. I mean, you can talk about any trade, you can talk about any growth, you can talk about any development, you can talk about any modernization or infrastructure. To my mind, this holds the key. And education, I looked at various analyses. Let's look at the NAS, National Achievement Survey. I mean, look at maths, even a state like Kerala, right in the forefront of education, hasn't done well. Class 5 student not able to do addition, subtraction. So several states in the red which need to become green and then become yellow and then green. Or look at reading comprehension, where a class 5 student is not able to do, I mean, the whole portions of red where reading comprehension is very poor, and you need to transform them. Or I then looked at ASAR, which is a very independent study, and whole portions of red in maths. Or students who can't read standard 2, or students who are not, and this is directly correlated to the infrastructure available. And again, health, if you look at infant mortality, the states which perform badly is the same states, Assam, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, UP. Or maternal mortality, Assam, UP, Uttarakhand, again the same states. And all this is directly correlated to the doctors' density, and it's not that doctors are not there. Doctors are there. They're all in urban areas, not going to rural areas. And therefore, you need to transform them, and the regional skew of health infrastructure needs to be corrected. Very poor immunization coverage in several states. And well, I looked at electricity connectivity as well, Bihar, Nagaland, Jharkhand again. But these, to my mind, are the backward districts where you have a dropout rate at elementary level, all these red areas, the people-teachers ratio, you have again, health index, these are the red areas, the unconnected, the connectivity is critical, but this is a combination of health, education, and reds. Unless these red areas are not turned into green, it'll be very difficult for India to grow over a long period. Now, what are we doing for this? What are we doing for this? And one of the key things which with Dr. Panagaria we started was that we must, first of all, start assessing states on the outcomes. And we must shift our focus from inputs and outputs to outcomes. And we said these are the defined outcomes. And we'll work in partnership with the states. So we picked up states and we said we are going to work. Niti will work in partnership with you to transform them. And we will rank you. So we will rank you, we'll make you compete, and we will prove that good governance is good politics. And therefore, this whole paradigm which we worked out across sectors on real-time monitoring, on real-time data, developing indices, ranking states, naming and shaming holds the key to our mind. And our view is that competition must be the key governance tool. It will push outcome-based competition, which will converge, which will put up a robust mechanism for real-time monitoring, push innovation, and therefore, both on health outcomes, on education outcomes, on water management outcomes, we are pushing this in a very, very big way. And one of the things we are doing in school is to push a lot of innovation. While we feel that this is the key, one of the things we are doing in schools is that we are introducing a vast number of tinkering labs. We've created about 2,000 tinkering labs. Our target is to put 10,000 tinkering labs in schools in the next 2 years. Create a huge amount of disruption in the schools itself so that we bring in a lot of innovation. We are doing a lot of incubation centers. But really the challenge is that how do we make India is going to be governed by the middle class. The latest National Council of Applied Economic Research says that 47% of India will be middle class. The voting pattern will shift from caste and class to roads, to highways, to infrastructure, to education, to water, to all this. And therefore, the challenge is that if once you create competition, once you create ranking, once you make states compete and work in partnership with them and put it in public domain that this state has not performed well, the electorate must vote out that government. That government must be voted out. A government which is not able to deliver on nutrition, education, and health must be voted out. That is our prime belief. And therefore, much of our focus right now is on making states compete, on providing this whole agenda of close competition and create a sense of good governance as good politics. Let me conclude, and I'll be very happy to respond to any queries that you must have. My view is that there are a lot of examples across the world. And I think India need not reinvent itself all the time. There are huge learning lessons from various parts of the world. We need to put it right, and with gender parity, with institutional restructuring, with a focus on exports, with size and scale, and with focus on these districts and these states, on the eastern part of India, it is possible, definitely possible for India to grow at a rapid pace of 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period. Thank you very much, ladies.